All right, well, let's get into it. Today on Sales Confessions, we're joined by Chris Amrod, go-to-market leader at Kit.com, a company that's transforming how people shop by connecting creators and consumers through curated product recommendations. Chris's path to sales wasn't linear. From creative beginnings to building outbound engines in tech, he's learned to marry storytelling with data. And now at Kit, he's helping scale a go-to-market strategy that blends authenticity with automation. He's also known for building tight feedback loops between sales and product, something that we might end up unpacking today. Chris, thanks a ton for coming on the show and welcome to Sales Confessions.
Thank you, Francis. Happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're excited to have you here. So the whole idea of Sales Confessions is that I think we, as a collective group, learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. So we will start, of course, with the confession. Chris, I hope you're ready to confess, but would love to hear what is something that in your career you feel hasn't necessarily worked and that you've learned from and that other people could learn from.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's funny. Every time I hear the word confession, I think about going to church and like sitting in front of a priest and confessing my sin. So I don't think I'll do that on this particular podcast, but it reminds.
We'll see about that.
Yeah. So I've been operating as a sales leader for almost 20 years now, and definitely made a few missteps, along the way. One that is probably more timely has to do with when it makes sense to commission or outsource certain responsibilities versus like bring those responsibilities in-house. And for me at Kit, I'm specifically referring to the RevOps function. So just for a little bit of context, I've been with the company for just a year now. I celebrated my 1-year anniversary last week, and managing the sales team as well as our migrations team, who really leads a lot of the implementation and onboarding for new customers. And we've never had anyone who owns our CRM and the go-to-market tech stack. So what I inherited when I joined was a bit of a mess. The CRM was polluted with bad data, and if the CRM is really meant to be the life force, of an organization, you could say that we were on life support, essentially. And when you think about, all the tools that round out, our tech stack that need to plug into the CRM, it's important that those tools have been implemented properly and they're serving us well, working for us and not against us. And what I quickly realized is there was a lot of work that needed to be done to get the CRM into a much better place, to make sure that we can adopt it as a source of truth, and to ensure that all the other tools that the go-to-market teams are using, that we're optimizing them, essentially. So there were a few folks at Kit who kind of inherited some RevOps responsibilities, but that wasn't their primary remit. They weren't RevOps experts. They didn't have that back-end systems architecture skills. And because we are a self-funded company and very thoughtful in terms of what roles we want to hire for and bring in-house versus the roles that we feel like we can contract out, we decided that we wanted to commission a RevOps agency, bring them in for a period of time to help clean up the CRM and just leave us in a better place. So I share that with you because it felt like the right move at the time, and vetted a few different agencies, landed on one that I felt, really good about. They had expertise in our CRM, which is HubSpot. So it seemed like the right fit. And unfortunately, the result really didn't meet my expectations. And I think there's probably a couple reasons for that. First is the team that was assigned to us did not have a true understanding of our business and our sales motion. Even though we've had conversations, about that, the majority of the customers that they support just had very different business models and sales motions. We are a PLG company with sales assisted growth. So very similar to almost like an SMB type motion, where you have a high volume of deals coming into the pipeline and a lot of data coming into our ecosystem. And then I think the second reason the partnership really didn't pan out, it was due to the fact that the people assigned to our account were not commercially minded. So they have the skills to build, in the back end of HubSpot, but they didn't truly understand like why they were building what they were building, because they didn't have like the commercial mindset, like that revenue expertise. So they weren't really working with a vision essentially and like true purpose. And what I found is I had to be so prescriptive with my kind of instructions for them. There was a lot of back and forth. Things would get done, but it would miss the mark because they weren't built the way that I needed them to be built. And it would take several iterations just to get one simple pipeline into a good place, as an example. And I definitely assume some responsibility for that. I'm sure I could have created better like project docs, for them, and perhaps been like a bit more like clear on like what I want the output to ultimately like look like. But yeah, it took a while for them to hit their stride. And I will say the CRM was better when they left than when they joined, but there's still so much work to be done to clean up the CRM and ultimately to connect, the rest of the go-to-market tools to, our hub.
I think it's a problem that we see in a lot of organizations, right? Especially external vendors, but it also happens with a lot of people in the profession where like RevOps is almost more of a tool admin than they are of a thought partner of the head of go-to-market. I think ultimately you want someone who's even going to be able to challenge you and would challenge your plan. I don't think companies should expect of the head of sales to think about what are the fields we need in Salesforce. It's more about this is how we want to sell. This is who we sell to. Set up a system that actually accelerates us rather than slows us down. And don't make me think about the system. I just want to be able to think about how I use the system to drive sales. And I think that's one of the challenges with external resources when you don't have someone who can be that kind of go-to-market tech architect internally, who's really thinking about how does the tech help our process, help our people, and potentially even how do we change our process to help our people. At the end of the day, it's really about how do we help our sellers sell as fast and as good as possible with the process and the products that we have in place.
Yeah. Yep. Spot on. I couldn't agree more. And again, going back to, the SMB motion where you have small or short sales cycles, I should say, you really need to be able to like experiment quickly, learn fast, fail fast. And you need a partner in RevOps to help you kind of build the frameworks for those experiments. Otherwise, it's going to take you way too long just to get one experiment off the ground. So I think that this is even more important with SMB companies relative to enterprise. With enterprise, like typically your books of business are much small compared to SMB, books of business. Your sales cycles are much longer. Your sales sizes are bigger, and you have more stakeholders involved, in the decision-making process. But I don't think there's as much experimentation, that happens at the enterprise level relative to SMB, which again is another, I think, huge value add that RevOps can bring to the go-to-market teams. It's really helping to architect those experiments, build the frameworks for them, and then collectively as a go-to-market team, we can really look at what's been working, double down on that, and then pull back on where experiments may have failed.
Yeah, it makes me think of, I started watching the show Formula One, Drive to Survive on Netflix, and it's super interesting how the drivers are excellent at what they do, right? And they provide some kind of like technical feedback to the technical teams, but without a RevOps team, it's almost like you're asking your drivers to build the car and to change the engine instead of being able to say, hey, like this was not working, that was working, please make the car perform better that way. And ultimately, you need to have these two elements to win a race. You can't just have an awesome driver and a terrible car, or a great car and a not so great driver. And so those two have to work hand in hand to be able to iterate really quickly and outpace the competition.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I've used one that's very similar. It's the pilot and the plane. Where imagine being a pilot flying a plane, but none of your instruments are working, and you're just relying on your intuition, your flight skills to fly the plane, to navigate, to land the plane and all that. You might be able to do it, but it's probably not the best way to operate as a pilot. You need your tools, your instruments, all the data to be working for you to just like better inform like how you're going to be, flying and planning your routes and everything.
Yeah. It feels like a very topical analogy to use with what's happening at Newark these days with all the systems going down.
Yeah. You had to go there, friend. That hits home. Yep, there's a bit of a mess at Newark Airport with the air traffic control situation.
Yeah, it works. You can do it for like 60 seconds, but I think anything longer than that becomes just like brutally dangerous.
Yeah.
And then it won't be in the funny territory anymore.
No, no, but powerful analogy, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Awesome. Well, switching gears, one of the topics we like to ask our guests is how are you using AI today in your sales process, and how are you fostering AI adoption within your organization?
Yeah. So our entire company is thinking about AI and how AI can scale the human performance. So this isn't just a topic that lives with sales or just the go-to market team. Everyone from engineers to people in customer facing roles, we're all experimenting with AI. As the sales leader of the company, what I've encouraged my reps to do and what we have been doing is experimenting with AI for like account research, just to better understand more about the customers that we're prospecting, that we're trying to serve, and getting some top level data points. So it could be like customer data points such as your contact information, technographic data. So for Kit, we operate in the email marketing space, and we want to know, which email service provider folks are using. So using AI to try to validate, the ESP that folks are using, that's all part of the account research element. And then once we've got, I'd say, some of the customer data and technographic data, we will feed the AI, value prop statements, Kit value prop statements. And we'll do so based on like the persona of the person that we're targeting, and use the AI to create more personalized messaging, for our outreach. So really more of an application on the outbound side of things, which is difficult. Using AI to really speed up the account research process, give us a bit more confidence in the technographic data, and then adding kind of like personalized messaging based on like what the AI is feeding us to our outreach is just one of the ways that the sales team in particular has been using,
And are you using ChatGPT, Claude? Is there one that you use more than the other, or are there different uses for each of those tools? So I know a lot of people will say that they prefer the style of writing of Claude, but they prefer the search and summarization capabilities of ChatGPT.
Yeah. Great question. And we're using both Claude and GPT. Our brand and marketing team really loves Claude. So we feed all of our brand messaging into Claude, so the AI can understand more about like our brand voice and tonality, etc. And then we will, prompt Claude to experiment or run like A/B tests for messaging on our marketing site, as an example, or subject lines for blog posts, etc. So I'd say brand and marketing has really been leaning into Claude. On the sales side, we've been using ChatGPT more so than Claude, and again using it for the outreach, creating kind of personalized messaging. What has been interesting to hear, and this is actually coming from prospects during our sales calls, is I've just asked my reps to always ask the prospect, like, how did you hear about Kit? Just so we can understand more about how we're landing on folks' radars. And we are hearing more and more that they're using ChatGPT to research companies in the email marketing space. So I thought that was really interesting that it's becoming a search engine for folks now. So that just tells me that there's so much that we can be doing, probably on the SEO side of things as well, to make sure that Kit is landing at the top of those search results. When we asked, how did you hear about Kit? Maybe 12 months ago, you get responses such as referrals or just some desk research or affiliates. But now it's like ChatGPT is actually one of the primary sources.
Yeah, this we talked about this in one of our previous episodes, that there's a massive change that's coming from this. Actually, one of our customers is seeing a massive spike in signups, in part because when ChatGPT in agent mode, when it's building applications, it uses their database as the de facto database. So what's interesting is that when we are vibe coding and letting the computers kind of decide how to build things, to some extent, procurement is getting delegated to the AI, right? And so today we're seeing it as referrals. People hear about us through ChatGPT or about Kit. And I think we're not that far away from having people say, I want to start, I'm a creator, I'm like getting past 2,000 subscribers. Now I want to move on to something that's a little bit more solid, migrate my stuff from my little MailChimp thing onto something more substantial. And potentially like Kit becomes the de facto tool that the AIs recommend. then that becomes a huge driver of traction, and that is a moat that is very hard to change. So I do think on the marketing front, there is something really interesting of how companies become the vendor of choice of the AIs out there, which is almost replacing Vendor and Tropical and those vendor management tools. And now we're delegating a lot of that to these agentic systems.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I didn't even think about that application for the tool. Yeah, like Tropic, Spendhound. Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
all those folks, which is definitely interesting, and I think is should be eye opening for a lot of marketers, and even on the sell side, right? We should be pushing our marketers to think about this and to think about how do we make sure that, when we're asking about what is the best system for creators, it should be in the top 1 to 3, right? So how do we get there? How do we think about this? It is a bit of a black box, but we need to experiment and we need to acknowledge that this is how the future of go-to-market is going to be.
I guess the last thing I'll say on the topic of AI is that we're also like trying to build in-house, so building like proprietary AI tools in-house, not just for our product, the platform that we sell, but to like enable or just better equip, the sales team as well. So there's almost like an in-house version of ChatGPT, but then also that it has access to other data sources. And because we've built it in-house, it just understands our business better than a ChatGPT as an example. And we have something in beta right now that the sales team's experimenting.
Love it. And I think this whole ecosystem is going to change over time as ChatGPT becomes more composable and people can connect different data sources to it. It is something that we are experimenting with so that we can have all of our customer data available to a specific instance of ChatGPT so that they could say, oh, like, go find me the latest signups that have more than 10,000 subscribers and help me draft a message for them. That's not that far away, but it is definitely something that is going to grow in relevance. Last question. What is a tool that you feel is underrated, something that you use either in your personal life, at work, that you think people should know about and might be worth trying out?
Yeah. So I have 2 kids that are young. Our daughter's 5, our son's 3. So when I'm not wearing my kit hat, I'm playing like 3 other roles. I'm either a husband, a father, or like a part-time athlete. So most of the time I'm chasing the kids around, and occasionally I'll have a date night with my wife. But when it comes to tools and data that I do like to use, this is more so on the athlete side of things. I've been wearing a Whoop band for the better part of 5 years now. So they're in the wearable device category. What I really like about the tool is that a lot of the wearable devices, it'll give you, data on your sleep, the quality of your sleep performance, your strain, which is essentially like how hard you're pushing yourself, every day, calories burned, steps taken, and also your recovery data as well. So how well has your body recovered from the previous day? You're going to get a lot of those data points from several different wearable devices. What I think Whoop does a really good job of is specifically around your recovery data. And what it does is it measures 4 different biometrics, essentially. And the few that stand out to me are your resting heart rate and your respiratory rate and your skin temperature. So if you see one or several of those measures start to increase, that is essentially a signal that something's wrong with your body. And what I've discovered is that when that happens, if I'm noticing my resting heart rate is starting to increase, or my skin temperature is starting to increase, or my respiratory rate is starting to increase, especially while I'm sleeping, chances are I'm going to be sick in about 48 hours. And that's been the case 100% of the time. So in a way, it almost serves as an early warning detection mechanism for you that you may want to take more vitamin C, take more zinc, and focus on getting a quality night's sleep, because right now, like, your body is fighting something. So I thought that was really interesting, and I pay close attention to.
I really like the idea of the preventive care element of it rather than being reactive, and early detection of any kind of problem rather than waiting for having to go out of office because you're sick in bed. Especially with kids, I'm sure it's like if one goes down, then it's going to be a pretty big hassle for the other parent.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, do I really need a device to tell me I didn't get a good night's sleep? Probably not. I know that. But it's interesting to see the impact that had on the biometric data So sleep efficiency is something it measured. So from the time you kind of laid down to the time you actually fell asleep, how long did that take? That measures sleep efficiency. And then your different sleep zones. So there's slow wave sleep, there's REM, and then there's light sleep. So it is interesting to kind of break down your sleep cycles and see how much time is spent in each one of those cycles. And sure enough, if you're sick, most of your time is actually spent in the light sleep stage and not in the restorative stages of sleep.
And that's why then you end up being so tired the next day.
For
Very
sure.
cool. Well, Chris, thanks a ton for joining us today, for providing a ton of valuable insight. If people want to connect with you, if they want to continue the conversation, learn about the creator economy, like what's the best way to be in touch?
Yeah, happy to chat with anyone who's interested in what we're building here at Kit, or if you just want to talk all things sales. I'm happy to be a resource for anyone in the community. You can email me at chris@kit.com. That's very simple. Or I'm on LinkedIn, Christopher Amrod. Feel free to look me up and send me a connection request.
Awesome. Well, love it. Thanks a ton for joining us, and looking forward to talking to you soon.
Sounds great, Francis. Thanks again for having me.
Of course.